Thanks for watching Lore and Morphology of the Sangheili, Part 2. What's going on, guys? It's Roanoke Gaming here with Part 2 covering everyone's favorite sentient reptile, the Sangheili. If you missed Part 1, I went over the physical traits and morphology of the Sangheili and how they evolved to be what they are and why they are. This video is going to cover history, family structure, and tech. Trust me, it'll be more fun than it sounds. So let's jump into this thing. Let's start with the basic family structure of the Sangheili. The Sangheili family is greatly valued and, as such, actually carries their own war poem per family grouping detailing the actions and deeds of family members during times of war. Interestingly, if you watch my earlier video on the Megalekgolo, they recite their own war poetry in the heat of battle. The Sangheili may have actually been the reason that the species does this, as the Lekgolo deeply respect the Sangheili for their honor and overall mentality. The males have been said to be trained by the family for combat since birth. The women are also trained alongside the males, but they are never seen on the front lines. Should an enemy ever make it past the warriors and soldiers on the front lines of the battlegrounds, they would also meet a strong fight with the females of Sangheilios who are tending to the homes. There are many types of families in the Sangheili world, and just like humans, the Sangheili form close relationships with their fellow soldiers. Referring to each other as brothers, they are exceedingly loyal to this family and, well, they'll fight to the death for them. The Sangheili are so attached to this secondary family that they will grieve for a fallen comrade with a ritual that includes prayers for them and their kin. So and I don't want to give too much credit to Halo 5, but it needs to be said, turns out we have more in common with the Sangheili than we'd actually like to admit. In some of the Sangheili clans, the children are going to be raised in common rooms. This can ensure that they are put on equal footing with the other Sangheili children and progress in the rank through their own merits rather than the actions of a parent. The children will rarely know their actual father and instead are raised by maternal uncles. The reasoning is that they get by on their own merits rather than the merits of their father. For instance, if your father was Thel Vadam, you would probably walk around pretty highly, right? Well, if you never actually knew that your father was Thel, then you would just be the average Sangheili. Ergo, your greatness would be something that you've achieved in what you've done rather than what your parent did. The children of Sangheilios would practice their hunting skills and combat skills that they have learned by hunting small rodents that lived on their world. So the history can quickly turn into a down the rabbit hole scenario, and we just do not have enough time for that. So I'm going to do a brief rundown of the history because otherwise, like I said, this video would be 2 hours long, and I really don't think you guys want to hear me talk for that long. So let's start from the beginning. The Sangheili were originally visited by the Forerunners before the firing of the Halo array. A lot of them were picked up and, after the firing, brought back to their homeworld. This event was known as the Reseeding. Upon their return to Sangheilios, they discovered many Forerunner artifacts and revered them as gifts left by their god. For a time, things were good. Then around 938 BCE, the Sangheili showed up, which was also a race that worshipped the Forerunners as gods. The main disagreement they had was how to utilize the artifacts left behind. Sangheili worshiped but didn't use. In contrast, the Sangheili worshiped but utilized the artifacts to their purpose, believing that these artifacts were left behind as a gift from their gods to their children. A war broke out over the usage, and eventually the Sangheili smacked down the Sangheili using a dreadnought that inflicted massive casualties. In 876 BCE, the Sangheili realized that there was no way they would be able to survive as a species without reconstituting and using the Forerunner artifacts, and a peace was drawn up. The Sangheili became the bodyguards of the Sangheili and most of the military might. For a while, their mettle on the battlefield was never really tested overall. The Lekgolo appear to have been the toughest enemies that the Sangheili and Sangheili bested. But then, a 5 to 6 foot hairless ape showed up and became a massive problem. The humans were spreading, and spreading fast across the cosmos. When the Covenant first encountered the humans after the humans had dropped out of slipspace, the Kig-Yar ship attacked, which would spark the battle for harvest. For a time, humans would lose planet after planet to the Sangheili and the Covenant. Billions died. But then the battle was turned and humanity created an equal to the Sangheili, the Spartans. But that'll be covered in another upload. When the Sangheili declared war on the humans, the Sangheili did not question and followed suit. However, as the war raged and time passed, the Sangheili began to respect their foe. They also began to question why the Sangheili would never even consider bringing humans into the Covenant. In battle, humans were obviously much weaker than the Sangheili, but their willingness to fight, and fight bravely, earned them a lot of respect from the reptile race. Sangheili noted that some humans would fight despite the overwhelming odds, and even saw that others would stay behind to sacrifice themselves to save others in the group. This led to a type of cognitive dissonance in the Sangheili as they continued to struggle to understand the pure hatred the Sangheili had for humanity. Over time, this led some Sangheili to completely disrespect the Sangheili and begin questioning their leadership, which perfectly ties into the Great Schism. During the final months of the Human Covenant War, political alignments began to shift and cause upheaval. The Honor Guard, which was originally a Sangheili-only group, was replaced by the Brutes. One brute in particular, named Tartarus, was seen as an overly aggressive and goal-oriented monster. This disturbed the Sangheili quite greatly, as they reasoned that if the Brutes started to desire power, this could be very dangerous. This eventually, however, came to fruition with the previous replacements. This was mainly due to the fact that John 117 was able to kill the Honor Guard elites and then subsequently kill the Prophet of Regret. After all the former mentioned, the Sangheili learned that if the rings were activated, it would also kill all life in the galaxy, and they learned this from 343 Guilty Spark. This created massive issues in the Sangheili, as this was their great journey that they have been on for thousands of years, and yet it's all coming crumbling down now. This was essentially the final straw. The Sangheili began to secede from the Covenant. This sparked a civil war that stretched from the human homeworld of Earth all the way back to Sanghelios. The Brutes stepped in at this point to fill the empty spots left behind by the Sangheili. However, even with the Brutes in power at this point, shortly after, the entire Covenant would dissolve. The humans and the elites would begin working together and eventually were able to take down the Prophet of Truth. Upon his death, the Covenant were completely dissolved. Next, they would have to tackle the Flood, but that will be covered later. In January of 2553, Thel would propose a treaty with the humans, but unfortunately it was not well received by the rest of the Sangheili, and civil unrest sparked later. In February, a ceasefire was formed to end the hostilities between humans and Sangheili. That being said, it wouldn't totally fix the issues. Let me know if you guys would like to see that, or know more about that, and for now we're just going to move on. Post-war, there was still quite a few sides to the issues, but for the most part, Thel seems to be top dog, which is a good thing because he's at least marginally pro-human. Now we're going to jump into the technology of the Sangheili. To give the technology a little bit of background, I will list them as follows. Tier 7 is pre-industrial, essentially the caveman days or prior to major industry. Tier 6 is steam engines, coal burning, the works, you know. Tier 5 is the atomic age. You discovered how to split an atom, now don't blow yourself up. I have a theory that this is actually one of the Fermi paradox barriers that usually takes out a species. So Tier 5, we've already passed it as humanity in the real world, but maybe when a species finds it on an atomic level, it becomes an issue. Tier 4 is space age. At this point, you send ships into space, but not long term. They need to come back to your planet. Tier 3 is spacefaring. Typically, this is going to be the endpoint for a lot of species. They colonize their solar system, use up the resources, war, and then die out. Tier 2 is interstellar. This is a major apex for a lot of species currently in the Halo universe. They can travel from system to system through space, colonizing many solar systems, and utilizing the resources there. Tier 1 are world builders. These were the forerunners and ancient humans. They build entire planets, halo rings, whatever they want. They can manipulate the materials that they need to get into super dense materials. Tier 0 is called transsentient. These were the precursors, and supposedly some Flood have achieved this as well. Not much is known, but they are species builders. Humans and Forerunners are supposedly direct byproducts of these precursor builds. Also, if you would like me to do a video, actually, I'm just going to do a video on that because tech tiers are really fascinating. So, moving on. Elites stood at about tier 3 to 2 on their own. Upon the war with the Sangheili, they became full tier 2 species. Their slip space drives in their ships were fairly accurate, and they were able to move much quicker through slip space as well. Their standalone tech would have been on par with humanity in the 24th to 26th century, if not for the intervention and joining of the Covenant, which sent them to much higher tiers. Okay guys, well that's a completion of their history, tech, and family as well. Let me know what you thought in the comments about their lore. I may legitimately just make a tech tier next because that stuff, it seems pretty cool to me. And you know, because it's interesting and I'm about to flood the market with Halo, Gears of War, and Dead Space lore, maybe, you know, they could use a standard for all three. But that's just for, you know, the future. Thanks for watching y'all, and I will catch y'all in the next one.